Go live with Lisa Genova. Let's see if that works. Oh. Yay!
I don't know how it happened, but we got there.
Oh my God, that's like my worst. That's my worst fear. I'm like, this is like the most stressful part of the process.
Oh no, sorry.
No, it's not your fault.
No,
it's Instagram. Okay, I was just thinking about one of the first event. I was trying to remember what the first event we ever did together was, and
I was trying to remember that too, and I can't figure it out.
So, do you remember that I wrote you a script to do an intro for an award, and you were like, "And here is a video," and you like pointed to the screen, and then the video never ran. Do you remember that?
I don't even remember that. Where was this?
It was at it was in DC, and it was like some big award, and you generously came down to introduce it, and I wrote the script, and it was like, and here's this video, and then the video never ran.
I remember it now. Yep.
And you looked out at the audience, and I was like, doo, 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 doo. Anyway, thank you for doing this. I'm so glad you're here.
Welcome. You're welcome.
For those who don't know you, which I can't imagine there's anyone that doesn't know you, but Dr. Lisa Genova is a neuroscientist, Harvard neuroscientist, super smarty, and six-time book writer. Six-time? How many of them are New York Times bestsellers?
Five of the
six are New York Times bestsellers, including Still Alice, which, for those of you who remember, was made into a movie starring Julianne Moore and who else? Kristen Stewart and
Alec Baldwin.
Alec
Kate
Baldwin.
Bosworth.
Oh, Kate Bosworth. Such a good cast. Okay, I want to hear more about that in a second. But I was watching your, not the TED Talk with the like 11 million views, but the other TED Talk about what would you do if you could do anything, whatever that exact title is, which tells the story of how you went from being a neuroscientist to being an author. And I will tell you that, and for those of you who haven't seen it, I will link it here later. But when I tell you that that video is like one of my go-to, like when I need to pick me up, when I need to believe that I can do stuff, I go to that video, and everybody should watch it. But can you tell that story, just a shortened version of it, because it's so good?
Yes, I mean, I'm glad you found it. That was at the TED conference in Vancouver one year. It felt a little like a game show, so like not on the main stage that year. They asked a certain group of us to do a 6-minute talk that would be synced to a slideshow, but we had no control over advancing the slides, so we had to time it. And the mic would cut off at 6 minutes. So if you even were 1 second over, your mic would go dead. So it was weird. It was like very game showy, which it was like, why are you doing that to us? There's enough pressure on us on that red dot.
Well, I thought just doing it would be pressure filled.
Yeah, you think. So that's a smaller talk, but thank you. I love sharing that message because I shouldn't be a writer. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. That was the experience that prompted me to ask, I did tons of research on Alzheimer's to help us better understand it. But what was missing at the time was the point of view of someone with it. And what was missing for me personally was an understanding of what does it feel like to be my Nana? Like I knew what it felt to be an outsider looking in on this, and a caregiver and a loved one. But I had lots of sympathy. I felt really bad for her, and I felt really bad for us. It was awful. But I didn't know how to feel with her. I was really uncomfortable around her and her Alzheimer's. I was very uncomfortable just hanging out with my Nana when she didn't know who I was, and she was, living in a reality that didn't make sense. And it was just so heartbreaking to me that I didn't know. I was 28 at the time. I didn't have the skills yet. And a lot of it has to do with kind of improv skills, to say yes and to her reality, to just drop into empathy and be with her where she was. I was instead too busy sort of mourning the loss of who she used to be. But I did recognize that, fiction's a place where you can walk in someone else's shoes. That's where you get to learn what it feels like to have Alzheimer's. If there were a story out there that told from the perspective of the person with it, then I'd be able to really understand what's going on inside my Nana. Like, what does it feel like to be her? And of course, she couldn't answer that question, even if I had thought to ask it of her, because she was too far along into the disease to have the awareness and the communication skills to answer it herself. So it wasn't until, so I'm a neuroscientist, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Someone should write that story. And I thought, well, maybe someday when I'm retired and I've got time and there's no pressure or need to do it, it would just be something I could explore to satisfy an answer to that question someday. And so a few things happened. I got divorced when I was 33, and I had been married to my college sweetheart. I had always imagined forever and ever with him. I grew up Catholic, which I'm not practicing anymore, but I grew up that way, and I'm 52. I grew up with Disney movies and rom-coms and the Catholic Church and our culture that says, like, this is the only way, to live a successful, happy life. And so I was really heartbroken and devastated, and really viewed the divorce as a failure. And so at first I couldn't imagine my future. It just was so scary to suddenly not know what was next. Like, I always knew what was next, right? My life was going like sort of according to plan. And now it wasn't according to plan. And so at the time I was unemployed. I had taken some time off to raise my daughter. She was born when I was 30. And I was going to go back to work after a year, but my marriage was falling apart. I didn't quite know what to do. And so I didn't go back to work because I just was sort of paralyzed in this sort of fear of what was happening. But now that I was divorced, it's like, okay, it's time to go back to work. I need to support myself. And I didn't take any alimony. I didn't take any child support. We agreed to split her expenses. So I needed a job. But so when I was like, well, I'll just go back to doing what I was doing before. So at the time when she was born, I was a strategy consultant for biotech and pharmaceutical companies. So I could go back to that, or I could go back to brain research. I loved both of those things. I was good at both of those things. I was trained to do both of those things. But this voice inside kept saying, no, what you want to do is write the novel. And I tried to talk myself out of it because it was not a reasonable thing for me to do. I had no education or training in writing. I'd never written anything other than scientific research papers. Those are not novels.
Not novels.
So the gist of it is I listened to that like inner knowing, that intuitive voice that says, do it. You're never going to quit a job to try and write this. You're out of work right now. You have some space and time. For the first time in your life, you're sort of outside of what's expected of you. Try it. It was very scary. And it was, again, like, it would have been safe to go back to doing what I was doing. I would get paid. I would be good at it. And my community would sort of relax in the knowing, like, oh, Lisa Genova's okay. She's doing what she's supposed to do. This decision to write a novel was like, she all right? Like, what's wrong with, like, there was some judgment going on that I had. So the questions I had to ask myself were sort of, the mantra was, if I'm going to do this, I have to not care about earning money right now. And I have to not care about status and success. And I have to not care what people think of me, which is hard. Because I think we are caught up in, like, things. I know, right? But the freedom that came in that, Allison, and like, this can be for anyone going through anything in life. If you can free yourself from the worry over what people might have to say or think about you, just that, like, you're lighter. You're like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I can do something that is true for me that some people are going to have a problem with, but maybe not. Maybe, so it worked out really well. It was really scary. And I did my homework. I read books on writing, and I became sorry, I keep doing this. I became a researcher again. But it wasn't in a lab with rats and, gels and DNA and RNA. It was like, who do I know, or who can I get in touch with that treats people with Alzheimer's, the physicians and the scientists and the genetic counselors and the general practice physicians. I lived in the Boston area at the time, so it was Mass General and Brigham Women's Hospital, which was great. And by the way, I have this background in neuroscience from Harvard, so it really did help open all those doors. And then the real experts were the people who live with it. So, you know, like you right now going through Parkinson's, like I reached out to the people who were young with Alzheimer's or who were in the early stages who could still speak about what it feels like to live with it and what are the fears and what do you wrestle with and, you know, how do you live with this? What does it feel like? And so I came to know 27 people really well who were living with Alzheimer's. Yeah. And like became my beloved friends. And some, I'm still in touch with some today.
That's amazing.
Which is a remarkably long time. But yeah, and I do that with all my books. I get to know the real experts, which are the people living with it and their families, but mostly the people with it. Yeah, well, and that was the key to understanding it.
I think it's so interesting that you took the path of writing the story of Alice through the lens, or you're essentially inspired by your Nana through the lens of a younger person, because, you know, and I've talked about this a lot here, and many of the people on this page are young onset Parkinson's patients. When I've told this story before, but when I was diagnosed, we left my neurologist's office with a packet of information, and every image in the packet was an older person. Mm-hmm. It was either an older man or a caregiver who was older, a spouse.
Yeah.
There were very few young people. Now, that was probably just that hospital and that particular packet of information. But I found it hard to find information and to find people who looked like me age-wise, right, who were young, working parents. And they're out there.
Yeah.
They're obviously out there, but they're harder to find. And so choosing to make the novel about a younger person with Alzheimer's, I think, really changed the direction in many ways of the public perception of this disease. Like she is a face of Alzheimer's that didn't exist in my world. Like my grandmother had it.
Right.
And she was 96, you know?
Right. And so my grandmother was in her 80s. And, you know, it's really, I didn't have a preconception of how old my character was going to be when I started, but the people that I got to know were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. These folks with young onset Alzheimer's. And it was what they look and sound like was so counterintuitive. Like it was so in the face of the public's perception of the disease. It was like, oh, Alzheimer's, that's a disease of the dying elderly, right? So you picture someone dying of Alzheimer's. First of all, you don't picture what someone living with Alzheimer's looks like, because this isn't like the flu and you get it overnight. It's a long process. So and you know, it can be 8 to 20 years.
Right.
So people are living with Alzheimer's for a really long time. And so what can that look like and sound like and feel like? And so because I got to know all of these younger folks with Alzheimer's, and I recognize that they aren't included in what gets talked about when we talk about Alzheimer's, that I had a chance to give them a face and a voice. And so similarly with Parkinson's, I think that people associate that primarily with older people, and the messaging that comes out of, you know, whatever organizations, Alzheimer's Association is certainly guilty of this too. It's like, let's put a picture of, you know, 285-year-olds on our, you know, media. And while that is one representation, you want to make sure that you're including everyone, because feeling alienated and lonely and alone in this is a burden that we shouldn't have to live with, right? It's like the disease is one thing, but don't make me feel excluded from belonging on top of it.
Well, and I also think many, as you said, the trajectory of Alzheimer's could be, you know, 8 years or whatever. Parkinson's too, like the runway, if you will, is long, hopefully for me.
Yes.
And so better to have people who have young onset, who are active, who want to be active in the cause to fight, you know, to end it. You know, if this had hit me at 89 or 90, I'd probably be like, well, I had a great life. Like, I'm probably not going to be up on Capitol Hill advocating too much. I'm going to live the rest of my days the best I can and be grateful that I got as many as I did. So to me, it's like, you've got to engage people who have it that are young in the way that you did, because we probably are the ones who are going to be like, we're not satisfied with no cure, with no disease modifying drug, with nothing, you know, because that's where we are in the Parkinson's space. There's literally nothing. So yeah, I really appreciated that. And I, before I knew you, I remember seeing Still Alice and thinking like, oh, Julianne Moore's like gorgeous and smart and young. You know, it was just like an eye-opening moment of like what Alzheimer's could look like. So
right. And
thank
like
you for that.
kudos to her, and bless her for saying yes to taking that role, right? Because there were yeah, you can imagine there are a lot of Hollywood actresses who would not want their image associated with a disease that is associated with being elderly. I mean, there's so much ageism that goes on, especially for women, that like a lot of women wouldn't want to touch that role with a 10-foot pole. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
What was it? Did you get to be on the movie set? Did you go to the Oscars?
I went to everything. Yeah, I was on the set. I was in it. I have a cameo. I'm in the.
You too?
I do. Yeah, I'm in the theater scene when Lydia, Kristen Stewart, is acting in a play.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I'm sitting in front of Julianne Moore next to Kate Bosworth.
Oh my gosh, so fun! And what were the Oscars like? Were they amazing, or are they better on TV?
No, I mean, well, I won. I didn't know Julianne Moore won. It was very fun to be there. No, it was really magical. It was so surreal. Walking the red carpet, I got to wear a beautiful dress from Rolando Santana, and I borrowed diamonds, so I had like $100,000 worth of diamonds on me. So yeah, it was amazing to be there, and the two producers who optioned the film rights and basically were responsible for this becoming a film, I sat with them, and we're just crying after Matthew McConaughey announced it. I'm like, oh my God. What? How did this happen? I mean, it's even so crazy. Allison, I mean, I don't know if you know, I originally self-published the book because no one would publish it. And I sold it out of the trunk of my car for almost a year.
I can't believe it. And my mom is on, I think my mom is probably on here. She runs a self-publishing website, encouraging people to self-publish. So she will die when she hears that. But yeah, I mean, just your unwillingness to accept no for an answer is just like, it's, you know, you say, you kind of casually say like, you just have to let go of what people think about you, which is such a feat. I mean, I just in this experience of putting this page together, I've had, you know, a couple of negative feedback, and it's hard. Like, it's hard not to take it personally. And it's hard when you hear no, when you tell that story of sending out your script to all of those publishing houses and they all said no, like that would have been probably it for me in my, probably at least in my early 30s. And like maybe now, but
yeah. So I sent out the manuscript. It wasn't so I sent out a query letter to 100 agents. Oh, right. And so, you know, all of them but 3 said no. They wanted to read the manuscript. I only heard back from 2, and they said, we read it. We don't think there's a market for this book. It's too scary of a topic. You know, there aren't going to be enough readers for this subject matter for general, you know, for fiction. And so it's this weird, like, okay, so that's just the opinion of 2 people and nobody else even read it. Like, am I one of those contestants on American Idol, like, who are auditioning, who think that they can sing but are really tone deaf? Or do I actually have something here? So, you know, I had some close girlfriends and family members who would have sat me down and said, Lisa, this is not a good book. You need to get back to reality. But they were encouraging at this
Get back in the lab.
Yeah. And I sent it to the Alzheimer's Association, and they loved the book, and I was blogging for them. I had enough traction in that, like, I knew I had something, and it didn't feel like the process that is sort of the traditional route to getting an agent and a publisher, that process didn't work for me. And so I wasn't going to continue this forever, but I'm like, let me give this a little longer and see if there's another way in. And it was 2007, and you could that was sort of the beginning of self-publishing. And so I knew there was a lot of stigma attached to it, and rightfully so. Anybody can publish anything. And I come from science where everything that's published is peer-reviewed. So I get that I'm now entering into a land of, like, you know, my book could be garbage, but it was the only way to give it a chance to circulate enough to develop a word of mouth that then, if this is if this book is resonating with an audience, then maybe it would have some legs. And yeah, now it's been translated into 37 languages.
I mean, legs indeed, legs for days. So one more question about your authorship, and then we're going to ply you with some brain health questions. So you finished another book. Is that your 7th book?
I just finished my 7th, yeah. Yeah.
7th book. And will any of the other ones be made into movies? Or was that a lightning in a bottle moment?
Yes, from our lips to God's ears. So it's so much easier to write a book, Allison, because you're in control of it. Like, okay, I'm gonna write it, I'm gonna finish it, and it can be hard, but it's yours. The movie thing is just So Inside the O'Briens is optioned and in development. Every Note Played is optioned and in production, and Left Neglected is optioned and in production. So they're all in various stages. I can't tell you everything about all of them. I wrote the script for Inside the O'Briens. It's the 3rd script for that movie, and I feel like all of the obstacles along the way are meant to be in that I got the chance to write the right script. Yeah. And there were some missing things in the other scripts. It's not to say they weren't good, but and I didn't notice what was missing. So now I'm really hopeful that we get this made the right way. But yeah, I mean, we had Russell Crowe and Nicole Kidman at one point, and then that dropped out, and then the script was rewritten, and it was changed quite a bit, and instead of Joe O'Brien and his daughter Katie sort of being the protagonist, it switched to Rosie O'Brien, the wife, and she's now the cop, and they got rid of 2 of the 4 kids, and it was a little bit too much for me. But we had Toni Collette and Thomas Hayden Church and Haley Lou Richardson, and we were good to go, and then the director left and the whole thing fell apart again. So the movie thing, and then same with Every Note Played, we had Angelina Jolie and Christoph Waltz.
Oh my God.
And then Angelina left first, and we lost our director, and Christoph Waltz hung on for 2 years and was taking piano lessons, because that story is about a concert pianist with ALS whose caregiver is his ex-wife. But he had to move on to other projects. But we're casting that up. We have Bjorn Runge to direct. He did The Wife.
Wow. Oh, right. Oh my God. What a process.
I'm so glad I do what I do. They can make the movies.
They can make the movies.
Yeah.
Okay, so I told everybody that I warned them in advance, you are not a Parkinson's doctor. No. And so we're not going to ply you with Parkinson's specific questions. Yeah. But I have listened to you speak many times, and you talk 2 things I think would be interesting for people to hear. One is sort of the difference between, that you've talked about, the difference between normal aging, normal forgetting, normal memory loss, and something to be concerned about. That I think people in this day and age, when you hear things about Alzheimer's, you forget your keys, or you forget your friends' names, which I do all of the time. I'm terrible with names and faces, that you automatically think, oh shit, I'm in trouble. Yeah. So that's my first question to you. Okay.
So yeah, I think that there's this expectation out there. So I found, because I've been talking about Alzheimer's and memory for over a decade, using Still Alice as that vehicle for conversation. And what I figured out is that most people assume that you're supposed to be able to remember everything, and that memory is supposed to be perfect. And so whenever you forget anything, this is a sign of impairment or aging or dementia, and it's a problem. And people get anxious and fearful and embarrassed, or they get secretive about it. They think it's something to worry about. So the categories of things that people think are a problem and that are 100% normal are: where did I put my glasses, my phone, my keys, where did I park my car? I'll tell you why in a sec. It's why did I walk into this room? Like, what am I in here for? Why'd I come in here? It's, what's his name? Oh my God, what's his name? That one that you just mentioned you're terrible with. Those are all totally normal. And the other one is when you forgot to do something that you meant to do later. So like, oh, I need to pick up the dry cleaning, or oh, I've got to, move the laundry from the washer to the dryer, or take out the trash. Like, oh, I forgot to do that. So our brains are not designed to remember people's names, to catalog everything we encounter, or to do things later. It's our brains aren't designed to do that. So, so a few things. It's okay to outsource the job. So like if you have I need to pick up 6 things at the grocery store, don't think, oh, I got to remember it in my head. Otherwise I'm weakening my memory, or I've got to work it like a muscle. Things that you need to do later, it's called prospective memory, are terrible. And everybody, it's not reliable. Like pilots do not rely on their brains to remember to lower the wheels of the plane before landing. They use a checklist. You have to outsource it. Right. It's okay to, basically I'm saying it's okay to write everything down that you need to do later. Put it in your calendar, use alerts, use pillboxes. Don't trust like, oh, I'm going to remember to take my medication every day. Like, yes, you can pair it with something you do every day. Like, if you're drinking tea or coffee, like, oh, I'll put it right next to that coffee maker. But put it in your calendar, have an alert. That's not cheating. It's also not cheating to Google names. So proper nouns, we can't find them. I think of them as living in neurological cul-de-sacs. There's ultimately only one road that's going to lead to that address for a proper noun. So like movie titles, book titles, people's names, cities. Unlike common nouns, which you can picture those living on Main Street in your brain. So there's lots of neural connections, lots of roads that can get to those. Names, proper nouns are abstract concepts. So they're tough to reach that address, so they get stuck on the tip of your tongue. You know it, but you're like, I can't get to it. Yeah. So it's okay to Google it immediately. Like you don't gain any points, or it's not actually good for you. You're not helping your brain get stronger, your memory to get better by muscling through it and coming up with it on your own. When you can't come up with a name, it's likely that you're searching in the wrong neural neighborhood. So you've probably come up with a related word, something that's similar in sound or meaning, might have the same first letter. You find like that happens a lot. You're like, oh, what's his name? Is it Lance? And you're like, it's not Lance. Yeah. And like now you're thinking of like Lance Armstrong, and you're like, you think of cyclists, the Tour de France, and Sheryl Crow, and blood doping, and you're all over that place. But it was actually like you were looking for Laird Hamilton, the surfer. So like, just like by sticking with it, you're not doing anything useful with your brain. So you can Google it. Right. The distinctions are clear. So like if it's actual dementia, then it's gonna be those common nouns, those Main Street nouns, like pen, spoon, phone, bicycle, like all day long. You're like, what's the name of like that kind of thing. It's not like, oh, I went to the mall and I came back to the parking garage and it's like, did I park on level 3 or level 4? That's normal. And then you actually aren't forgetting anything. You didn't pay attention to where you parked. Right. So the first necessary ingredient for forming a memory that lasts longer than this moment is attention. So when you can't find where you put your glasses or your phone or where you parked your car, it's probably because you didn't give it 1 moment of your attention. Like, oh, I put my glasses here. And then you zip off to do the 12 things, and you're answering your kids' questions, and you're texting your whoever, and you're like looking for whatever you're looking for. Same with the car. So if I just park the car, but I'm already texting, or I'm thinking of 12 different things, and I run off to the mall and I never paid attention to where I parked, I can't remember. Did I park on 3 or 4? Not a memory problem. It's a symptom of distraction. If you have dementia, you come out of the mall and you think, I don't remember how I got here. Yeah. Or you could be standing in front of your car and you have a moment where you're like, you don't recognize it as yours and you're still looking for it. Right. Which is so much different, So much different. Yeah. So everybody who has the where did I put my stuff? Can't come up with the person's name, or, oh, the Netflix show. Why did I walk in the room? And the stuff you need to do later. Those are all normal. Don't worry about any of those ever again. Okay, good. And I'm the worst at, especially lately, because I'm worried about my brain, but I'm the worst at forcing myself
to remember things that I know I could just look up on my phone. I do it all the time. It's like, oh, well, if you can't remember we went to our 30th high school reunion 2 weekends ago. Okay. And I was like, I'm not going to look at names. I'm not going to look at name tags. I'm going to remember. And no, I couldn't remember anybody. Like, who could? It's been 30 years.
Yeah,
but, you know,
way different, to be fair.
Right?
Like my hair is gray, and people who've seen me like a month ago don't recognize me because I don't have the black hair anymore.
I love your gray hair. I'm ready to, I was just looking at my roots before I came in here. I was like, oh, I gotta go back again. Anyway, okay. The other thing I wanted you to talk about a little bit is, you know, for those of us who already have a incurable neurodegenerative disease, or for people who don't, I think some of the behaviors that we're supposed to adopt are the same. Mm-hmm. That, you know, whether you have something or you don't, you need to be doing what our friends at HFC talk about are the 5 brain health habits, which are, I'm going to try and remember them right now, but sleep, meditation, nutrition, physical exercise, and something else, mental health. And if you had to pick one, I'm really hoping you're not going to say the one that I know you're going to say because I'm bad at it, but if you had to pick one, what would be the most important one to keep our brains as in good shape as possible?
Yeah, and so these are all the things that you just mentioned are it's your brain is part of your body, so they're not separate. So it's great for your brain, the health of your brain overall today, so brain and body today. And it's helpful for preventing problems in the future. And if you are dealing with something like Parkinson's, like Alzheimer's, these are also things that are going to help keep you where you are for as long as possible, right? Right. So like I tell people all the time, the things that we're going to talk about that you've mentioned that have been studied slow or prevent or reduce the risk of, I'm going to use Alzheimer's as an example because that's where I spend most of my days, is reducing your risk by anywhere from 30 to 60%. Like if we had a pill that did any of that, if we had a pill that would reduce your risk of developing Alzheimer's by 30 to 60%, we would all take it. So yeah, these things are, you know, it seems like, oh, that's not, I don't know, somehow it's like not sexy enough. Right? So it's the 2 biggest, I think, that cross over to Parkinson's as well, exercise and sleep. I think.
Yeah. Okay. So
diet comes on the heels of that for sure. Yeah. But so exercise, I know for Parkinson's is one of the only things that's been shown to have an effect. And it absolutely does for Alzheimer's.
One of the first things that my neurologist, I've switched neurologists now, but one of the first things she said to me was, exercise, high intensity interval training, cycling, running, whatever it is, exercise is one of the few things that you can control that will hopefully keep this in check for as long as possible. So I know there's a lot of different folks on this and that will see this later on. Like, I hope people will hear what you just said, like 30 to 60% potentially to reduce your risk of getting something like Parkinson's and I think the Parkinson's world hasn't quite adopted the brain health stuff yet as much as the Alzheimer's world has. I'm hoping that we can change that and that becomes part of the pamphlet of information that you're given when you're diagnosed, if you will. But I hope people hear that and really, absorb it, because you can work out, eat right, sleep, do all the things you need to do and potentially delay progression or not get it at all. So unfortunately, the sleep thing for those of us in the Parkinson's world seems to be I'm learning, a massive challenge. I don't know why, but I am up every single night between 3 and 5 and I can't fall back to sleep. And I know a lot of my friendly Parkinson's friends have it because we're up in the middle of the night together. So sleep is a real challenge, unfortunately, but not much to be done. I don't think about that.
I tell folks it's like, not just folks with Parkinson's. I think that sleep plagues most people. And it depends on where you are in life too. Like I always say, use women as just an example. So it's like, if you had kids, you were pregnant, and then you were breast or bottle feeding, and then you go into perimenopause and then menopause, and like all of those phases of life are opportunities for you to get terrible sleep. So it can be a little terrifying to hear that, oh, you need 7 to 9 hours of sleep for optimal brain health today and to reduce your risk of neurodegenerative diseases in the future. Like, one of the things that's going on while you sleep, it's not an unconscious state of doing nothing. So you're very biologically busy. Your sewage and sanitation department in your brain, these are your glial cells, they go to work when you sleep. So you're asleep, but they're doing the night shift and they're clearing away the metabolic debris that accumulated while you were in the business of being awake. And so it can be really scary to learn that, oh my God, I'm not getting enough sleep, so I'm screwed. And you just sort of throw up your hands and think, well, I can't do anything about that then. And you just sort of la, 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 la. But every night so it's like we're very resilient as well. So like if I get a terrible night's sleep tonight, I don't get Alzheimer's disease tomorrow. Okay.
Right.
So that's, thankfully, we know that it takes like 15 to 20 years of amyloid plaque buildup before it reaches a tipping point that will be me having symptoms of Alzheimer's. Prior to that, it does build up. So every time I can get a good night's sleep, I'm knocking it down. And so, and right. It's not just the sleep though, it's everything, right? It's exercise can knock it down. Eating the foods from the Mediterranean diet can knock it down. But you know, if I have a day where I eat terribly, maybe my risk goes up a little. If I am sedentary for days on end, it might go up a little. But I've got room. I've got, right. 15 to 20 years of room here. So it's like, okay, don't panic if tonight goes badly, if you're up at 3 a.m. It's like every night's an opportunity to hopefully get a good night's sleep. And so what's one thing you can do that is maybe a little different? Be a little scientist about it. Like, okay, don't change like 20 things. Change one thing tonight. That's like, okay, maybe I'm going to try going to bed a half an hour earlier tonight. Or I'm going to get off the screen a half an hour earlier tonight. Or I'm going to take a bath before bed. Or to try something. There's lots of literature out there on sleep aids. And I know it's hard. I really, really do. I've struggled with sleep in my life as well. But try something and be a little scientist about it. Like, okay, that didn't work. Let me try something else tomorrow. Because it's worth it. You'll feel better day to day. By the way, so with respect to memory, the stuff that you cared about today. So what do our human brains remember? What is it good at remembering? It's good at remembering what's meaningful, emotional, surprising, new, and what we repeat and practice. So if you're learning a new sport or an instrument, like if you practice that over and over and over, if you're studying for a test and you practice it over and over, or if it's meaningful to you, like you probably don't remember what you had for lunch last Wednesday. No idea.
No. But
if lunch last Wednesday was your birthday lunch or, a celebration or a holiday, then it's meaningful and you might remember it. So of what you paid attention to and cared about today, that becomes a long-term memory while you sleep. That gets woven together as a linked neural circuit while you sleep. So if you disrupt your sleep, if you don't get enough or if you don't get the quality of sleep, you'll wake up tomorrow with those memories not fully formed or maybe not formed at all. You'll forget some of yesterday.
The brain is so fascinating.
I know. It's so fun.
How does that even happen?
It's so fun. So it's like, I think understanding that there's important shit going on while you sleep in your brain, like helps you like, okay, well, let me try to make it a priority. Don't freak out when it doesn't go well because I'm resilient. And but I'm not gonna just give up. I'm gonna like, okay, like, well, what can I do now? Like make it important to you. The exercise thing, it's like if you're sedentary, so for folks who are sedentary, if I could have 2 copies of ApoE4, one from mom and one from dad, that's a gene variant that increases your risk of Alzheimer's. So Chris Hemsworth, Thor, has 2 copies. So he has a 12-fold increase of developing Alzheimer's, which is scary. But we found that like there's been a lot of studies on this. So if I have 2 copies of ApoE4 and I'm sedentary, my hippocampus in my brain, which is the part of your brain you need to form new memories, it's your memory weaver. It's the part of your brain that's attacked first in Alzheimer's. That's why people have trouble remembering what just happened as the first symptom. That will be shrunken. It will be smaller. if I'm sedentary and have 2 copies of APOE4.
Wow.
If I'm not sedentary, if I'm an exerciser, regular exerciser, like Chris Hemsworth is, my hippocampus will look normal. So it's not just your predisposition. It's the genes you've inherited, and it's how you live. They interact.
Amazing.
So it's exercise, it's what the food is that you're putting in you. I mean, also the exercise. So why would that be so? We don't understand all of it, but let me give you folks this. So, because this is good for Parkinson's to understand, like, well, why would exercise help me? So your brain is about 2% of your body mass, but it requires 20% of your body's energy. And that energy is delivered by your blood, by your vasculature system. And so the blood delivers oxygen and glucose. Those are the 2 things you need to make energy in all of your neurons and all of your cells. And so if your vasculature is compromised, then your brain isn't getting enough energy. And if your brain is energy deprived, the cells that are most vulnerable, so maybe, your dopaminergic cells are like, we're trying, like we can, as long as you keep giving us enough energy, we can do what we need to do. But if it's energy compromised, then you're going to notice maybe a deficit. So the exercise is, really, we know this, right? That exercise is good for your cardiovascular system. So we think that one of the ways that exercise really helps boost your brain's function is by way of delivering it the energy that it needs, because the brain needs more energy than any of your other organs. So it's very sensitive to any depletion in energy.
Yeah. That is like the first time, I feel like that's the first time I've ever asked that question or been told the answer to that question of why does exercise help your brain? Like, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And so maybe that helps, right? If you're like, oh, I get it. I know, like, that this is actually doing all of this, walking or running or HIIT training or dance or yoga, whatever it is, pickleball, whatever you're out there doing, like, oh, I'm helping supply the energy my brain needs to all those nerve cells so that they're not limping along.
What I know is that when I do, and this is, you've just explained why, when I do it, my symptoms are less. My brain function is better. My symptoms are less. I feel better. When I don't exercise, when I don't work out, when I don't do the physical therapy that the PT that Parkinson's patients are supposed to do, my tremors are worse. My speech is worse. Everything is worse. So it makes total sense. I mean, I know it's not easy. And I think a lot of people on here feel the way I do, which is like, oh, it's just one more thing to like add to your list of crap that you have to do. But
I know
it's really makes you feel better. And now I know why.
Yeah. And so exercise can be, I think sometimes you need to shake it up. I actually was just thinking about this today. I think I'm a little bored with what I typically do, and I need to try something new. I think that, like, for me,
pickleball.
Like, getting out there, I love pickleball. Getting out there and being, like, I could do yoga at home, but I like going to the yoga studio because it also gives me a chance to be social, to see some people in my community, and we humans are meant to be social. Right. So like evolutionarily, a human being who was alone was a dead human being. Right. You were in danger. You were vulnerable to predators or some sort of danger. So evolutionarily, we are wired to not want to be alone because that's life threatening. So it's good for our physiology, even for us to be amongst each other, to feel connected socially. So if you can combine exercise with social connection, that it'll feel good. Like sometimes just exercising home alone just feels, we can get burned out. So maybe try reaching out and being like, oh, let's go walk with a friend, or go do something that's like a group class, or belong to a gym where you might meet someone there. It can help motivate you to stick with it.
I have been unable to read questions. Again, I can't even tell if there are any, but I adore you. You are literally the smartest person I know. I love you.
I adore you
too. I know a lot of smart people in this space, but I am just so appreciative that you gave us your time. It's 45 minutes. It's even longer than I thought you could give me, but I just want to thank you because I said this at the beginning, but I really feel like the path that Alzheimer's has walked, that the advocates, that the awareness, that the people who have fought for changes in the Alzheimer's space is going to benefit the Parkinson's community too, eventually, hopefully. And I just think of you as sort of a pioneer in this space. And I'm so glad I've known you for so long. And you always say yes when I email you and ask you to come to Austin or California or wherever else we've been in the world. So
yeah,
thank you for doing this.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure working with you all these years. And yes, I think there's no reason for everybody to reinvent the wheel, right? If Alzheimer's space has figured out how to activate young people or how to, gather resources or gain some traction in a certain area, that the Parkinson's can't piggyback and learn from that and say, oh, we're going to do that as well. So yeah,
I mean,
brain health in general,
brain health in general, I think, is becoming a movement. I credit many of the organizations that you and I have both worked with on that front. And we know those sort of people who've been pushing that for years, and it's working. And I think there's a movement here happening in the Parkinson's space of lots of young moms and young dads who are like, or, just young people in general who are like, I'm not going to accept that there's no cure and that there can't be a cure in our lifetime, because frankly, I'm not willing to leave this to my kids to have to solve. So we'll get there on the Alzheimer's front, we'll get there on the Parkinson's front, and we'll both be old ladies, and we'll have this conversation again many times, I hope.
I love that. Yes, I believe that too. I believe that too. I mean, and the thing I like to tell folks too who aren't in the science world and don't really understand sort of the genetic and molecular implications of the latest, study that's published, just even think about your cell phone. So think back to 2000. Right? What was your cell phone? And if you had one in 2000, think back to 2004, what your flip phone was, right? And think
I still
about
had a BlackBerry, probably.
Or 20 years later, what your phone is capable of, that amount of innovation. So similarly, we didn't have the technology to study what was going on at the molecular and genetic level with Parkinson's, with Alzheimer's, with ALS, with Huntington's, like we do now, right? It's just, it's light years difference, just like your phone. So I would tell folks, don't be discouraged that we haven't seen the cure yet, and be encouraged that, wow, we've got the tools now to actually to study exactly what's going on and create some interventions that should work. So yeah, very hopeful that in your lifetime, absolutely. I would bet on it.
I have hope.
Yeah.
I have hope.
Same.
And I'm grateful. Thank you for doing this.
And
I will, for those who didn't catch us live, I'm going to post this on my page so they can all see it and learn from it. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't wait until you go to your next Oscars. I could be your +1.
Okay.
I will gladly just walk around behind you carrying your train, whatever you need.
You're very, very sweet. Yes, I want to do that. And I want it to happen soon because I want to bring my dad.
Oh my God, stop it. Don't make me cry on this. I've kept it together, at least at Genova.
Make the movies.
Stop the strike. No. Okay. Bye.
Allison, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.